Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Hey everybody, this is William Hayashi coming to you from Chicago. This is the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. And tonight, even though you may be listening to this at another time, is the August 2nd edition, 2013. And we have a very special guest tonight, Jerry Craft, who on his own website says he's a syndicated cartoonist, he's an illustrator, he's an author, and I find it so sad that he had to actually publicly put that he's a nice guy. So, Jerry, welcome. And what made you put the nice guy thing up there, first of all?
You know what? It's actually something that when because it's on my business cards too, and it always gets a double take, and it gets a conversation started. And then after, we hang out or I do a book signing or something, they'll come and go, "Hey, you really are a nice guy." I'm like, "Well, thank you. It's important for me."
Well, I mean, that makes sense. I used to have the most fun you could have with your clothes on, but people always took it the wrong way. So you do have to be careful with your marketing, at least from my perspective.
Especially if I do a lot of kid events, I got to be real careful with that. So I thought nice guy was safe.
That's true. That's true. All right, so where are you coming to us from tonight?
I am in Connecticut. I've been here for, I'd say about 17 years. I grew up in Washington Heights section of New York City.
Uh-huh. And about how long did you stay there when you were growing up?
I was born and lived for, like the first 30 years of my life in like a 3-block radius. I grew up about 2 blocks from Columbia Presbyterian Hospital and also the Audubon Ballroom where Malcolm X was assassinated. So that was
right.
Like the big landmark by there. So that was where I grew up playing stickball and riding bikes and going around the corner to the basketball court and all that kind of stuff. So we were like the little rascals growing up. I had a great time.
Just kind of like your average, what you would consider like an average Americana kind of neighborhood, right?
Yeah, with the urban perspective, I mean, we, instead of baseball and Little League, we had stickball and, some games that we made up and, the concrete, touch football, and there was a little area nearby, like literally right across the street from my house, which was, handball. There you go. There was a monument, Jamel Mansion, where it was supposedly one of George Washington's headquarters. So They used to have buses come all the time, but we'd go out there and we'd be playing tackle football on the lawn, and every once in a while they would chase us off. But then,
right.
When they had big guests, I remember meeting Queen Elizabeth. I was probably about 7 years old. She came to visit. But it was we really were like the little rascals. There were like about 10 of us, and we just did everything together. So I couldn't imagine having a better time growing up.
Wait a minute, you met the Queen?
I actually met the Queen.
How did that work out, man?
She, what? I actually have a photograph somewhere that I have to look. And I was, like I said, I was about 8, 9 years old. I borrowed my dad's camera. And she came to Jamel Mansion, and she's walking around, and, there weren't a lot of people there, because, I mean,
right.
it was still up in Washington Heights, right off of Harlem.
Right.
So it wasn't like they got a lot of press, and she just walked around, and, she came up to us, and, I asked if I could take a picture. She's like, sure, and I did it, and like I said, one of these days I'm going to come across that, and I'll have to post it up on my Facebook page.
That's pretty cool because, that's not, especially for, let's say, a young black child, that's not the thing that you always, well, for me it was Muhammad Ali. He would come and he would illegally park in our parking lot so he could go visit Dick Gregory across the street.
Wow.
Okay, so, well, I mean, and he had a big red convertible, and we'd hang around there, and it was always Saturday. I don't know if they had a regular, meeting or whatever. And so we'd be hanging out when we knew he'd be coming out, and we'd all have our baseball stuff on. and he would drive us down to what at that time was called Farmer's Field, because it was around the corner from his house. But I mean, you kind of expect, you know, black folks running into black folks, but then here you have the Queen of England. You know, that's not what you would consider your average everyday notable stopping in. I think that's pretty cool.
Well, you know what was so weird is that, you know, there would be tour buses coming from all over the world to see this place.
Right.
And, you know, we'd be playing stickball, and then we'd have to stop because, you know, two Greyhound buses
coming down the street, yeah.
Come down, they would stop, and then they'd come off. And I remember my one friend, Kenny, who was, you know, milk chocolate complexion, you know, and this woman from somewhere other than the U.S. came over, and she just looked at him, and she was like, may I please touch your face? And, you know, we were like 10 years old. He was like, okay, and she touched, I don't know if she expected it to come off or if she expected it to feel different, but this was like, you know, an epiphany for her, you know. So it was interesting to have those kind of interactions, you know, with that. And then they'd come and they filmed a couple of movies around our block across 110th Street, which I actually rented not too long ago to watch. Ragtime, because they had an old cobblestone street right on the side of my house. Oh,
cool.
Yeah, and then the very last scene from Malcolm X, when Denzel gets out the car, he's literally standing in front of my old house, and then, you know how Spike does that, pulling you on the dolly thing, it looks like you're floating.
Right.
Yeah, it looks like right past my house. So it was a really cool neighborhood.
Man, that's kind of funny. You know, they come and they see Negroes who aren't in captivity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I touch you? Okay, so, I mean, you went to school there. You were there for about the first 30 years of your life. Did you go to public school, like for, you know, elementary and for high school?
No, I was actually a private school kid. My parents, I think, experimented on my older brother and sister and didn't necessarily like the results, so I was 9 years junior to those guys. So by the time they came, they're like, yeah, I don't think we're going to send you to George Washington instead. So I went to the school in Harlem, 141st Street and Convent Avenue. I was actually born. It's funny because, like, it's like, I might even do this in a book because all the stuff that I came up with is, like, gone, like it's being erased. You know, like the hospital I was born in Harlem, Sydenham, is closed down. The junior high, the elementary school, which is Mount Zion, they call it School on the Hill, that's gone. You know, then I went to school up in Inwood, which was, you know, St. Matthew's. That was a uniform school. That's gone. And I'm like, uh-oh. It's like it keeps, you know, trying to catch up to me, so I got to keep doing new things.
And so it's, I guess what they, you know, do you think maybe it's you and not just coincidence?
Oh, yes, it's definitely me. Somebody is trying to erase me. So, yeah, you know, get my books now because there may not be any in a few years. They'll be like, hey, wasn't there a strip called Mama's What? No, I don't remember that.
Jerry, who? I don't remember nothing about that.
Curtis, right?
Yeah. So, okay, so you spend all that time there, and kind of like, when did you start, you know, maybe not, I don't want to say discovering your talent, because some people have innate talent and you know, they have great imaginations and things like that, but, you know, given the fact that you are, you know, you're a syndicated cartoonist, one of the few black ones, and for people who want to check out Jerry's website, you can go to www.jerrycraft.net, because somebody else with that name had .com and wouldn't give it up to him. That's usually what happens.
Yeah, and I didn't even think to get it because the very first one I did was mamasboys.com, and then someone's like, yeah, you should do jerrycraft.net or jerrycraft.com. I was like, nah, I won't do that. And then, of course, 15 years later, I'm like, yeah, you know, maybe I should have done that.
Yeah. And you know, my name, even though it's Japanese, it's like the Johnson of Japan.
Oh,
And
really?
so, oh man, I'm telling you, there are so many Hayashis out there. It's sad. And you know, the unique part of being a Japanegro carries no weight on the internet. Carries no weight at all.
Gotcha.
You know, you would think that I would have some pull because I was multi-ethnic before Barack and Tiger and whoever else, but no, nothing.
Nothing.
But anybody, yeah. So www.jerrycraft, all one word, .net, and you could check out his site. A lot of things on there. So anyway, let's go back to how old you were when you started, you know, finding or developing or displaying, you know, the kind of creative things that have brought you to where you are today.
I got to tell you, I just always remember drawing. I mean, nursery school, you know, I probably won my first art contest in about the third grade, or something like that. Started making comic books in probably about the seventh grade. And then I remember my brother was in the Marines. He was stationed in Okinawa. And we used to go see some of those blaxploitation movies, and I would come home and do a comic strip version of it and mail it to him. So, you know, Shaft and Superfly and, you know, Three the Hard Way and that kind of stuff. So
Sure.
that was some of my first sequential stuff, you know. And I just liked doing it. And then from there, you know, I loved comic books, X-Men, and we're talking the original when it was just like 5 of them. Spider-Man, Silver Surfer, those were my favorites. And then I would try to draw them. And then, you know, I made up my own characters. And then in school, I met a bunch of guys, Eric and Winston, people like that, who would also make up their own comics. So we all had like our competing lines. And it just kind of took off from there.
That's pretty cool. Now, were your teachers and your family both supportive of your artistic endeavor? Did you get some encouragement, some guidance? You know, how did that work out?
Yeah, it was, you know, I mean, my father was the one that was always like, you know, here's some crayons, here's this, here's that. You know, my mother thought it was cute. Yeah, you know, it's a nice little hobby, you know. And I think once they realized that I wanted to do it for a living, then it started becoming a little scary, because I remember taking the test for music and art in High School of Art and Design, and they were like, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Nice encouragement there, huh?
Yeah, you're not going to be living in our basement until you're 50, so you're gonna go somewhere where you can learn some marketable skills. So I went to a high school called Fieldston in the Bronx. And so that was like, you know, an academic, although I did still take art classes. That was my first, like, silk screening and life drawing and stuff like that. So I still kept busy with that. Print shop. And then when it came time to pick a college, I was old enough to make that decision on my own. And I've just happened across School of Visual Arts, which I had never heard of, but they used to have this college fair downtown. And I looked it up. I was like, this is a real college? They're like, yeah. It's like, and it's for art? They're like, yeah. And I checked it out, and that was it. That was all I needed.
Yeah. About what year was that?
That was like 1980. Something like that. Yeah. I think it's 1980. Yeah, and then I got my Bachelor of Fine Arts. I actually, you know, I went there, and the cartooning classes, they got booked up so quickly that I never actually took a cartooning class at SVA. Because they had people, like Will Eisner was teaching there, and some of these guys who were legends, but I didn't know them. Like if it had been, John Buscema or some of the Marvel guys, I would have known them, but I wasn't into Will Eisner stuff at the time.
Right.
But there was a waiting list to take his stuff, and so I took advertising and I took some copywriting classes, and really started to like that stuff. Especially the copywriting, coming up with like little jazzy slogans and stuff for print ads and the radio commercials. So when I graduated in '84, my first jobs were actually at ad agencies.
Like locally there, or did you? I mean, in that area, in the New York area?
Yeah, in New York. Yeah, New York
okay.
at the time was booming. That whole Madison Avenue thing.
Sure, yeah.
And I had seen stuff like that on TV, and I think since my parents had also seen on TV, they, I guess, gave their blessing for it being a real job, because like, oh yeah, that's like that guy from Bewitched. Okay, yeah, we approve of that. You can be him. So I did that for, I'd say, about 8 years, and I wrote some print ads. I wrote some radio commercials. I wrote, I think, 2 TV spots. I actually did a voiceover for a radio commercial for English Leather Cologne, which was pretty funny.
Well, you got good pipes, man.
Well, you know what? It was the weirdest thing, because I had written one of them, and when they went to record it, one of the guys didn't show up.
Okay.
So, being the the black guy on staff, sometimes has its advantages. And it was like, hey, do you think you could, go and read that commercial? I was like, yeah, I could do that. So it was pretty cool. It was very funny. It was one of those, though, where the other guy was like, I don't want to say overly black, but when you get these radio commercials where
yeah, stereotypically,
some guy named Skeeter,
yeah,
and I'm like, nah, I'm not, that. I remember Hollywood Shuffle, and I always think of that. I was like, nah, I'm not sticking my butt out when I talk. I'll try to be funny and add a little something to it, but I'm not doing that. And they recorded it, and it played a couple times. I think I got some stuff from SAG or AFTRA, one of those things,
right.
A couple residuals. I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. So.
And did you get paid? Did you get residuals? All the cool things that come along with doing some voiceover?
Yeah, it wasn't a whole lot, but it was a check in the mail that I wasn't expecting.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And another thing that on my in my biography, when the chapter after meeting Queen Elizabeth, there'd be my English Leather commercial. So I got some pretty cool trivia stuff going on.
Well, and it's so strong too, meeting the Queen.
And I actually forget about it, and then when I put it all together, I'm like, hey, this has actually been a pretty good ride.
Yeah. About all I had at that time, I did like I was a child TV person for someone local here in Chicago for the Lee Phillips show, and I'll be very honest with you. I forgot all about that until a couple years ago when somebody was mentioning. Oh no, they inducted her into the Hall of Fame, the Radio Hall of Fame that they have here in Chicago.
Uh-huh.
And I went, wait a minute. I was on her show. I was a kid on her show. But I think the reason why I forgot was because, I didn't have any of that Todd Bridges street cred for messing up my life, as a child.
Oh, I got you. Well, you're still young. There's still plenty of opportunity.
The problem is right now I have the face for radio. So I'm sure that maybe I'm not telegenic enough to do that TV stuff anymore.
I got you.
Yeah. So now, when you were doing the advertising stuff, did you keep up with your own personal stuff? Some of the the comics and things like that. What happened there?
Yeah, I still, because now I had friends. My friend Eric worked for a messenger company, so they had some really funky uh, duplicating stuff. Like now when I drew a comic book, they could put run it through the copy and have like colored stock, and then he could like bind it with this fancy plastic binder.
Oh yeah. Okay, sure. It was kind of like almost like publishing equipment for the whole thing.
Right, and this is before, Kinko's and these things where you could go and pay someone to do. Like I wouldn't know where to do that, and he had the massive hookup. So I would go and we'd print 25 copies of my comic book and stuff like that. By then I was doing superhero stuff, so I was like, dude, this is cool. This is like the next step. And trying to ink stuff and just get it better and work on my writing and stuff like that. So yeah, I was doing that, and then yeah, you know what? Also, there was a newspaper, a local newspaper, and my father used to bring it home all the time. And it had a cartoon in there, and this thing used to just make me mad. I would look at it, and I would just dog it. I'm like, this guy can't draw. He's not funny. How could he be in the paper? All this. And my father basically was like, look, he's in the paper. You're not. Shut up.
I like that. I like that kind of support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did it push you? Did it push you?
Yeah, it put. Man, I called up that newspaper. And I was like, listen, I got a comic strip. I'd like to show it to you. They're like, oh, sure. I went up there, and literally, I think 2 weeks later, they started running my strip. This is actually the precursor to Mama's Boyz. It was called The Outside View.
Okay.
And it was basically like maybe 6 or 7 teenagers, kind of a rainbow coalition of teenagers, just, with different things. And then I remember my father bringing home the paper one day, and I was just waiting for him, And it came, and I opened up the paper. I was like, hey, Dad, remember this? Yeah, remember you told me, I can't say anything because I'm not published? And then I opened up, it was like, bam! Here I am.
What was his reaction?
My dad was a very low-key kind of guy, He was just there, and I'd have to be like, wow? He's like, oh, yeah, it's impressive. That's good. Yeah, okay. And then I went, and then, of course, knowing me, I probably went, okay, now, look at how this guy draws his thumbs, and he does this, and he does that. So, probably my career as a published cartoonist, I probably owe as much to spite, than anything else. So, there you have it.
That's pretty cool. And so, how long did that last? Or are you still writing for the same paper?
No, I don't even know if that paper exists. I don't think it does. So from there, I was like, hey, I got in the newspaper. This is pretty cool.
Right.
And then simultaneously, the advertising business just went completely down the toilet. It was like, Betamax. It just tanked. And now all of a sudden, I had gotten laid off. And, every job I've ever gotten laid off, it's like 3 days before Thanksgiving or like 2 days before Christmas.
Right.
So I remember that. And so I went to School of Visual Arts, their placement office, and there was someone that was looking for an assistant to do a comic book. And I was like, hey, I can do that. So I called the woman up, and I'm praying that, this is, this is so-and-so from Marvel Comics, and, I want to do Spider-Man or, something like that. I'm finally going to do my superhero. And I called her up, and she says, yeah, I'm doing this 7-part series for Marvel. And I'm like, yes. And I'm doing this. And I'm like, yes. And all this. And she's like, and it's kind of an Archie set in ancient Rome.
And you said, what? Yeah.
And I was like, oh, God, Archie, really? Archie set in ancient Rome. So it was a girls' comic, like Marvel's short-lived girls' line.
The reach out to girls, yeah.
To reach out to their girl reader. So I went through my brother's comic collection, which luckily he had some Archies, and I drew Archie and Betty and Veronica the whole weekend. So by the time Monday morning came, I basically had a whole new portfolio. And I went, I got the job, and I worked with this woman, Barbara Slate, who I still consider to be my mentor. And we did about 7 issues of a book called Sweet 16.
Okay.
We did 2 graphic novels, Yuppies from Hell and Sex, Lies, and Videotapes from Yuppies from Hell. And then we did probably about 4 issues of. Are you sitting down?
Yeah. Now I am. Yeah. Go ahead.
For about 4 issues of New Kids on the Block.
Okay.
Yeah. New Kids on the Block, and that was my breaking into comics. And then I got one printed in Ebony magazine, and so then I had changed the outside view into Mama's Boys.
Okay.
Oh, wait. I got to back up a little bit. So then I'm working 3 days for Barbara Slate.
Right.
So I go back to SVA, to the placement office, and I see that King Features is looking for an intern. And I had sent the outside view to King Features to try to get syndicated, and I actually got a rejection letter, but it had a handwritten note on it that was like, hey, this is pretty good. Keep it up. So when I went to look for, who the guy was who was looking for an intern, it was the guy who had written me the handwritten note.
Oh, cool.
I'm like, dude, this is karma. So I went and applied, and I got that job. And even though, I didn't think I would ever intern again, because now I'm, 22 or whatever, and this was like, hey, we need someone to work 5 hours a week for $5 an hour, which was like, I could go to Blimpie for that.
Sure.
I took that job because I got into King Features, and then I would go to their Christmas party and meet, the guy that did Phantom and Mort Walker from Beetle Bailey and all these people. From there, it became a 3-day-a-week job, a part-time job.
Right.
And then I would start to go to like the Reuben Awards. So, now there's me talking to Charles Schultz and Lynn Johnston and people like that, Ray Billingsley. And then it became a full-time job. And then I ended up using my drawing skills to fix up strips. So, like, if Dagwood and Blondie had short sleeve shirt on in one panel and long sleeve shirt on the other one, I'd have to fix it.
You were kind of like continuity.
Yeah. I guess the highlight of that was I had to redraw the last panel of a Spider-Man strip.
Okay.
And this is, you can put this on the fun fact thing after the English leather and the Queen thing.
Right.
So there was a Spider-Man strip, and it had Spider-Man was swinging, which obviously he does. He's a web slinger. And you see a worry balloon. It's like, hey, stick 'em up. No, I'm going to shoot you. And Spider-Man's, Spidey sense tingles, and he jumps down, and he's like, you want to fight someone? You fight me. And then you pull back, and the last panel are these two little black kids who are about 8 years old.
Okay.
And now, why his spider sense tingled, I don't know, I guess because they were black. So, because obviously
it was essential to the plot.
Yeah, I mean, they were toy guns, but, I'm like, hey, his spider sense really shouldn't have been going off like that.
Right.
So a newspaper actually it was the LA Times, and they were like, listen, we don't want this to be little black kids. We need these changed to little white kids. And they didn't have time to go back to the artist to do it. So like, hey, Jerry, can you, redraw this panel, make them little white kids? I'm like, okay. And so I did it, and some fan somewhere found out about it. I guess he got, because the LA Times is the only one that made that change.
Okay.
So I guess he was looking at the LA Times, and then he picked up, another one. It's like, hey, look at this. And next thing, it's in like, Comics or Comics Reporter magazine, and
right.
It's a big deal. Yeah. And so I actually got my boss to ask Stan Lee to sign it, so I've got that hanging up on my wall. So
that's great. Did you meet him, or you just did that?
No, I never actually met Stan.
Okay. Hang on a second.
Yeah, so it's hanging up on my wall.
Yeah. You're listening to Genesis Science Fiction Radio, a service of the Black Science Fiction Society.com website. And for those of you just tuning in, didn't catch it from the beginning, this is the August 2nd, 2013 edition. And we have, I'm just going to skip all the syndicated cartoonist, illustrator, author. We have nice guy, Jerry Kraft, on as a special guest, who met the Queen of England, did voiceover for English Leather, changed black to white, and probably has a host of other stories that we'll be getting into for the next hour and a half.
New Kids on the Block.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You did a New Kids, what was it? Was it their comic or just
Yeah, it was their comic. They actually...
New Kids on the Block comic.
Or Harvey Comics. They had a whole line of them.
Uh-huh.
Yep. And they actually, talk about overdoing it. I think they had, 6 titles per month. So it was New Kids, Breaking Bad, New Kids,
They were trying to oversaturate their market, huh?
Yeah, but talk about oversaturating. Yeah, so that was that.
Oh, well, I mean, when you do something like that, obviously there's a whole, there's a certain amount of anonymity for yourself. Yes, you're the artist, you're the inker, you're the whatever, but, other than meeting the Queen and maybe a couple things like that, were there any notable, and I don't want to downplay the people in your industry who you met, who you really got to, when you think about rubbing elbows with Charles Schultz and more, all of these people, the Beetle Bailey guy, that's pretty cool. And especially at an early part of your career, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then that's got to drive you forward. Because not only are you doing the thing that you want to do, but there are your, and I don't mean this in any wrong way, there are your superior peers in terms of accomplishment and, notoriety. I can't see how that would not be a huge boost to your career in your own self-image and things like that. How did you feel running into people like that?
It was all right. No, it was great. I remember being at one of the Reuben Awards, and my buddy Jim Keefe, who was doing the Flash Gordon comic strip at the time, and we look over, and there is Charles Schultz talking to Lynn Johnston, who did the For Better For Worse strip, and I'm looking at it going, and we're just looking at it like, wow. And I'm like, come on, let's go talk to him. And he's like, we can't go talk to him. That's Charles Shelton Lynn Johnson. I'm like, I'm going to talk. Like you can stay if you want. And so we went over and talked, and they were so nice. And I actually got to be pretty decent friends with Lynn Johnson. So when it came time to when I did my first Mama's Boys book, she wrote the foreword for it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, which is really cool. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely something that I did realize it at the time. Like, wow, this is really cool. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than Mort Walker and Charles Schultz and some of these guys. So I enjoyed every moment of it.
And so now let's take a look at I mean, they're all great. Let's take a look at your career. When did you start? I mean, what year was it when you started Mama's Boys?
I think I started the self-syndicating thing because once I got the job at King Features, they had one of the few black editors in the business, a guy named Paul Hendricks. And Paul kind of took me under his wing, and he was like, well, listen, if you're serious, let's talk. So I showed him the outside view, and he was like, okay, you know what? Too many characters, you should probably take the main two characters and maybe make them brothers,
Okay.
And then if so, then, is there a mom? Is there a dad? Who are the friends? That kind of thing. So then that's how Mama's Boys came, and I just really changed it up a little bit. I made things a little more simplistic. I got rid of a lot of the characters, and that was probably about 92. So I think I was still running in that local paper, and then I said, there I got to use, the equipment there. This is like the photostat machine and all that kind of cool stuff. And so then the Xerox machine, I would stat my comics, and then I went to the library and got a list of black newspapers in the country and just sent out samples. And I got picked up by the City Sun, which is here in Brooklyn, New York. The St. Louis American, I think the Broward Times, the Houston Sun, and the Philadelphia Sun, and a few others. So now I'm in like a dozen newspapers. But they're all over the country now. So now once a month, I'm photostatting them, the different sizes, and I'm sending them out. And like, wow, this is cool, From there, King Features had this thing called the weekly service. And so like if you were starting your own newspaper, you could subscribe to the service. So it had some original comics. It had some classics like Flash Gordon, and it had, horoscopes and car columns and things like that. So I was able to get Mama's Boys in there. So it started probably about 95 or so. And so that was the start of the whole weekly syndication thing.
And how were you received? I mean, what was kind of like the growth factor or the way your popularity grew, and how did you know that you were actually making the mark? I mean, what kind of feedback were you getting, and in what form?
Well, I think it wasn't until I did my first book. I did my first book in 97.
Okay.
And I was looking at, I'd go into Barnes & Noble and stuff, and there were 500 books, Beetle Bailey and Peanuts and Foxtrot, and you look for the ones with the black characters, and they really didn't exist. There was one that I came across by Barbara Brandon. She was doing Where I'm Coming From. But, a lot of the syndicates had, it seemed like if you were syndicated for like 2 years, if you made it past that 2-year cut, you'd get a book. You'd get a book.
Okay, sure, yeah.
No, so there were ones that I never heard of, and I'm like, he's got a book.
Yeah.
And then I would look at Curtis, which had been around 15 years, 300 newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
There's no book.
Nothing, yeah.
And I'm like, well, where the heck is Curtis's book?
Right.
Where's Herb and Jamal's book? Eventually I did see a Jumpstart book. A couple of Wee Pals, but, the Wee Pals ones were, like 4 by 5, and the Calvin and Hobbes was 18 by 24. It was just such a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, you know what? Let me send out. So I sent my stuff out to about 4 or 5 publishers, and first one I got was a rejection letter. I was like, okay. Second one I got was a rejection letter.
Uh-huh.
But the third one that I got, they weren't interested either. So I was like, oh, okay. But now the next one, not only weren't they interested, but this guy took the time to say, we're not interested in this kind of good time style of humor. And I was like, good times, huh? Okay. And that was
you're talking TV show Good Times, right?
Dynamite, yep.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Which, it was like, to me, I was trying to do something that was intelligent. It wasn't just about insults,
Right.
Good Times was, 30 minutes of, hey, Thelma, you so ugly they could stick your face in some dough and make gorilla cookies. And then the last track was like, yeah, okay. And, I was like, God, that's like a white writer really trying to come up with something special. And they're like, yeah, this whole Gilligan's Island thing that you're doing, that's not going to work for us.
Yeah, but you know what? It was, to my way of thinking, when I hear you tell the story, I immediately think something a little more, I don't want to use the word sinister, but it's like someone took the time to go ahead and write that almost as if they hadn't even looked at what you really did.
Oh, absolutely. And
to take that time to write, a mini screed like that when they obviously didn't read what, it's like, okay, so what's the motivation behind that kind of behavior?
Right.
And how did you take it? I know you were confused, but
yeah, I was more angry than confused because.
Were you really?
Oh yeah. This is probably, right after my dad saying he's publish or not, shut up.
Right.
Right. Probably the next foot on the gas pedal.
Sure.
This is probably the one that did it next because like you were saying, just stuff the darn envelope and shut up. But he's sticking in the envelope, he's sticking in the envelope, whoa, wait a minute. Where's my pen? Yeah, I want to make sure that, not only are we not going to syndicate you, but I don't want you to even think that you can get syndicated. So don't even waste anyone else's time.
Yeah.
And, I worked at King Features, so I saw the stuff that came in there.
Right.
And, at least my stuff looked professional, like whether he liked the good time style of humor. But, there was stuff coming in on notebook paper in crayon talking about, me want to be syndicated. And it's like.
Well, people in prison have a lot of time on their hands.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know that firsthand, but, you know.
Well, from what I've heard.
But you know what I mean? And it's
like... Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So for him to really write that was like, wow, that's foul.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, you know what? I will never send stuff out to a publisher again. So I went to this place called the library. I got a book on how to self-publish a book.
Sure.
At the time, we were using Quark Express.
Right.
I, had my Photoshop files, pulled them into Quark, found out how to do, the ISBN number, the barcode. Found a printer in North Carolina, loaded up on a SciQuest disk, sent it down there, and about 3 weeks later had like 2,500 copies of my first book, Forward by Lynn Johnston.
Right.
So that was the very first step, and that's how I actually became, a publisher as well.
Right. Yeah. And what was the response? Well, first of all, let me ask you, where did you send those books? Okay, so you're sitting there, you got a few boxes of books in your house now. What was the next step you took?
The next step was using all of my my copywriting skills, my marketing skills, and my contacts. So I got a huge write-up in Cartoonist Profile magazine.
Okay.
My friend Jim, who I told you about, who did the Flash Gordon thing,
right.
we kind of did an article for each other, and we knew that they had very limited staff. So I was like, hey, I'll write a 6-page article on you if you write a 6-page article on me. It was like, deal.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they realized that that's what we did, but that's what we did. And then like Comics Journal and Comic Scene. So I got these like really cool write-ups. I got this Forward by Lynn Johnston, one of the most popular cartoonists in history, basically.
Sure.
And I sat back and waited for the orders to come in. And I am still waiting for those first orders to come in because I got no response.
Really?
A couple of letters, hey, good job, whatever, but as far as people sending in a check, didn't happen.
What's the circulation, or at that time, what was the circulation of the publication?
I mean, it was in like 4 publications. So Cartoonist Profile, that was more of an industry one.
Right, yeah.
But I forget if it was Comics Journal or Comic Scene. That was kind of a big one in the industry at the time. And they just did not come. And it was shortly after that I was like, I'm guessing that my audience is not a mainstream audience, that it is the people that look like me. And after that, I just focused all my attention on there. So I would go to like, Black Expo and the Kwanzaa Fest and, that kind of thing. And, people would then come over and say, hey, can I get these for my son? I'm like, well, how old is your son? And he's like, 10. And I was like, ooh. Like, there was nothing bad in Mama's Boys, but I had always written it for people like myself, adults that like relationships. So I had to think about it. I was like, could a 8-year-old really read this and like it? I wanted to sell, and like I said, I knew there was nothing bad, so I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess. And I remember one guy in particular, he bought it for his son, and his son went over, it was like in a gymnasium. He went to the room, sat there, read it, start to finish.
As soon as he got it.
Yeah, and I was like, kid's book. Interesting.
Mhm.
And then people go, oh, yeah, can I, oh, what's the age group? Oh, 8 to 80.
Mhm.
And then I started doing it like that. Now, at the time I was changing jobs, I went from working at King Features to working as an online producer at Sports Illustrated for Kids.
Sure.
And there I got to, make games for the site. I got to interview athletes like Derek Jeter. I got to review Xbox games, go to the NBA draft, cool stuff like that. And that was where I learned how to do flash animation.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, and then that became part of my job. So because I was working full-time and doing pretty well there, the books, they took a while to sell.
Right.
Because I think I had bought like 2,500 books.
Mhm.
And so one day I'm looking at the book, like, oh, yeah, just looking through it. And I look at the copyright date, and it's 1997. And it's now 2007.
Mhm.
And I was like, wow, this book is 10 years old.
Right.
I'm like, where did the time go? So I was like, oh, I got to do a new book. So
Whoa, wait. How many did you have left over 10 years later?
I probably had 300 left. So I mean, I sold, like 2,200.
That's not bad, man.
I mean, it's like a 10-year span, so it wasn't like jumping off the shelf.
Well, yeah, I published in 2009, and I think I've sold 8 books. Well, no, I take that back. Maybe no, but yeah, here's the thing. Even though you had good credentials, you still didn't have kind of like the consumer-based notoriety right off the bat, which made it a lot harder for you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And then I even got written up. There was a book, Great Books for African American Children by Pam Toussaint. That was in there. They picked it as one of the good books for kids. And then I got some Mama's Boys comics in Chicken Soup for the African American Soul and Chicken Soup for the African American Woman's Soul. So people started learning about me there. And then I just started doing more. So, yeah, by now I was like, okay, I need to do a second book. And so that was when I did Mama's Boys Homeschooling, and that was 2007. I think I got 2,000 books. And then I think I sold out of those in 2 years. And then I said, okay, I'm going to try to do a book every 2 years or so.
Sure.
In 2011, I did Mama's Boys, The Big Picture, and I sold like 2,500. This is actually the first one I ever had to reprint. So I sold about 3,000 of those in maybe 2 years. But then, the strip started taking off and getting write-ups, and, I started doing interviews and things like that. But then one of the things that I did in 6 years ago, I guess it was 2007, I left my job at Sports Illustrated for Kids, and instead of me being the guy that did Mama's Boys, I decided that I needed to brand Jerry Craft and not Mama's Boys.
Right.
So then, because what happened was there were so many people that knew me from different things. So some guys knew me from Mama's Boys. Some guys knew me from maybe Ebony.
Right.
One guy came up. He said, "Oh, what's your name?" I was like, "Oh, Jerry Craft." He goes, "Jerry Craft, you used to do New Kids on the Block." And I was actually afraid for my life because, like, my dad wouldn't remember that. And this guy picked my name out and knew that. And I was like, oh, my God, how long until he's, like, wearing my skin as a mask or something. I was.
Well, yeah. I mean, you never want to run into a potential stalker face to face.
Yeah.
Because I mean, how you get in your car, you try to drive away, they follow you home, and and then it starts. You come home, they go, no, here, throw me the keys, I'll park your car for you, and that's the beginning of the end. But you've gotta be happy though that you made enough of an impression. I mean, like you said, who would remember that? I mean, yeah, your dad would know or your family would know, but obviously it stuck with this guy.
Yeah.
So you were making an impression.
I think it was even worse. I think it was like, wait a minute, not even just you did New Kids on the Block, but it's like, wait a minute, you did New Kids on the Block, Hanging Tough. Hanging Tough #1, and New Kids on the Block, Cold Chillin' '3, and I'm like, security.
Yeah. No. I think you have me mistaken for the other Jerry Kraft, illustrator.
White Jerry Kraft.
I'm a chef, and I flip burgers.
Yeah.
Okay, so now when you take a look at how long you've been syndicated and all of the places you've been syndicated, what kind of feedback are you getting from your readers, and how did that build? When did you start getting, or do you even pay attention to your email or to comments or anything like that? Some do, some don't.
I mean, I answer every single email. My fan interaction, for lack of a better phrase, is extremely important. So, it is, if it's a coherent sentence and there's something there, I always respond. Every once in a while it's been criticism. Like I got it pulled out. I did a series one time where there were these teenage girls online at a movie theater, and the guy says, "Sorry, girls, but no one under 17 admitted without their parents." And then you pull back, and the girl's like, "Well, we are parents." And one of the little girls had a baby. And that pissed some lady off in, where the heck were they? They were in, like...
As long as it wasn't New Jersey, man.
No, it was in Maryland.
Okay.
Prince George's County, Maryland.
Sure.
And she called the paper up, and the paper called King Features up. And I was like, listen, relax. That's the first one of a whole story where Yusuf, who's the 16-year-old son, Mom makes him watch a baby for an entire weekend so he could see how hard it is. So I wasn't just dogging the kids. Now there's... It
wasn't gratuitous.
Right, absolutely. So just bear with me here. And they punked out, and they're like, "Oh, no, we don't." But anyway, I ended up putting it on my website. And because it was like 10 strips, and I said, what do you guys think? And that was probably one of the biggest catalysts, because I got maybe 500 emails, and people were like, I printed this out, I showed it to my 16-year-old son, and I used that as a jump-off point to talk to him about sex for the first time. Thank you so much. And I was like, wow, I did that? And that was really cool. So that was one of the first times where I could see that it could really have an impact with readers. And that gave me the confidence to go about and do more stuff like that.
A little more edge to it.
Yeah. I remember reading an e-newsletter, and it talked about how diabetes was running rampant in the Black and Latino community.
Sure.
So I called up the American Diabetes Association. I was like, "Hey, got a syndicated cartoon here. You want to work together? We can do some stuff." And they were like, "Yeah." So for about 5 years, Mama's Boys were the spokes characters for the American Diabetes African American program. So I had never explained why there was no dad in the strip.
Right. Right.
And to be honest, if I was creating the strip now, because of the lack of black dads in so many of our, outlets, I would definitely have a dad in there now.
Sure.
But at the time, it wasn't quite, it wasn't epidemic like it is now. So I had the mom raising her two teenage sons because a lot of my friends were raised by their mom or their grandmother.
And again, it wasn't gratuitous, it was
right.
situational.
Right. And I wanted to pay, respect to these women that were raising kids like this.
Right. Hang on a second. Hold on. Let me just do this real quick. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. This is the August 2nd, 2013 edition, and we're talking to the fascinating nice guy, and you can see that he's a nice guy if you go to his website, Jerry Craft. His site has most of the information about him is www.jerrycraft.net. And take a look at what he's done. He's the author, creator of Mama's Boyz. He's got several books out, and really a pretty fascinating guy. And for those of you who have been listening to how he got where he is, I think the lesson to be taken away is, you have to make your own opportunities. You have to take your own chances. I mean, Jerry, how many phone calls do you think you've made on your own behalf that turned out into rejection compared to, how many where somebody said, that sounds like a good idea, like the one you just spoke about for various medical things. You don't just automatically make a phone call and get a hit, do you?
No, not at all. 1 in 50.
Yeah.
Maybe, but when, here's a few things. One is, make sure that your product is tight. That's the first thing, because, you can't be that guy on American Idol mad at Randy for not picking them, and, you're in a bikini and a straw hat singing off key. It's like, yeah, okay, come on, work at it. And, the best illustrators and writers that I know have been doing it for a long time, and they still take criticism.
Sure.
Alex Simmons, who created Blackjack, Machindo Kumba, one of my good friends. Like, we critique each other's work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You look at Dawood and Ibwile, Brother Man, like, these guys are drawing all the time. And when I leave Ekbox, or, when I went to Onyx Con or some of these others, first thing I do is go home and draw. Machindo tore one of my pieces up. We were in Philly, and I was all proud. And, I showed my portfolio, and I had, printed this piece out. And, I was like, hey, what do you think of this? And he's like, brother, where's the light source? I'm like, I don't know. What do you mean? And he's like, dude, if the light is coming from the sister's 3/4 view, you get a shine here, but it would cast a shadow here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got a pen? He starts drawing on my printed thing. Now, it wasn't an original.
Right, sure, but still in all, here you are thinking, oh, man, I'm really proud of this. This is tight stuff. I can't wait to show it to him specifically. And then he goes, so is there a light bulb here? Or
where's the light source?
Uh-huh.
So now here, and see how the elbow comes out? It wouldn't do that. See, it's too jagged. You got to curve that around. We were on a street corner in Philadelphia.
Uh-huh.
It was probably 1:30 in the morning. I'm looking over my shoulders, figuring we're about to be arrested any minute because they're going to think it's a drug deal. Like, no cops.
Because you're hanging out on the corner, right? Yeah.
Hanging on the corner. No, really, officer. He's critiquing my
critiquing
Photoshop.
my cartoon.
Yeah. And I went home. And I fixed it. And I held that up and I said, here's the light source, here's this, here's that. And I fixed it and I looked at it and it was like night and day. And I called him up. I was like, dude, thanks. And you have to be able to do that. Like I'll be at a convention and these guys will come to me and show me their portfolios, and I'm like, I said, oh, I see you have a problem doing hands, huh? What do you mean? No, I don't have a problem doing hands. What do you mean I got a problem doing hands? Well, I noticed that in every panel, your characters either have his hands in his pocket, or he's scratching his head, or they're behind his back. I'm like, I'm on page 8. I haven't seen a hand in this entire book. I said, here, let me give you a few tips, and let me show you an easy way to do hands. I don't have a problem doing hands. Okay. All right, you know what? You're amazing. Call up Stan Lee, tell him I sent you, and go to Marvel Comics Monday morning. You've got a job. Like, obviously, they don't want to hear anything from anybody.
Yeah.
And I used to tell my wife, I'd let her read my comic, and sometimes she'd be like, well, I don't get it, but, I'm not a cartoonist. I'm like, yeah, but you're my audience. Cartoonists aren't my audience. So if you don't get it, I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm going to redo it until you get it. So either I will redo it until you get it, or I'll have to find a wife who actually gets my jokes. And it was much cheaper and easier for me to just redo my strip. So that's I got in the habit of doing it. So it, I'm looking on the chat. Got to be humble. Absolutely. And
the other,
that helped me a lot.
Yeah. The other thing is, and I'll tell you this from a novelist perspective, a lot of people, a lot of other novelists that I've run into are very, very similar in that same respect, and they don't take criticism well. When when someone comes to me and says, can you look at my manuscript, and I look at it and I see, an obvious weakness, and the first thing I ask them is, do you really want me to critique this, or do you just want me to tell you how great you are? And of course they go, no, seriously, I want to hear, what can I do to make it better, blah, blah, blah. And then when you start running it down, then they don't want to hear it. So that's a tough dichotomy to run into. But I mean, you look at there you were getting a drawing lesson at 2:00 in the morning on a corner in Philly, and to this day, we drag your butt on the radio today, and it's something that made such an impression on you, you will never forget it. And that's a rare gift of, oh man, I want to say a repudiation of ego over talent, because a lot of people have ego far in excess of their talent, and those people who can listen, who can take the criticism, are always going to be stronger for it. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't realize that. But look what it did for you. I mean, when somebody told me, hey, you're a little wordy, and I said, okay, and then I looked at it and I said, okay, well, I guess I can cut this 750-page book down to 500 pages if I really try, because nobody wants to read a 750-page novel.
Right.
But so, I mean, that's rare. Jerry, it's rare what you did, and I think that the best artists are always going to be a work in progress, because I think that the best of us, and I don't even know if I'm the best of us yet. One day I may be the best of us, or even the goodest of us, or even the good of us. But most people seem to have a lifetime of learning ahead of them and don't mind it. They find it exciting. And it sounds like you have a community of support, a circle of friends who aren't afraid to say, hey, Jerry, you got to go home and fix this before you show it to anybody else. And you take that to heart, you listen, you look, and you learn from it. So, I mean, that's a lesson I hope that people can take away and listen, you know. I know people who can't draw a hand with more than 3 fingers on it and a big-ass thumb.
Yeah.
And they want to be illustrators. And I find that hard to understand. I mean, you say you learn things, you get excited about things, you come home and the first thing you do is draw, and that sounds to me like a certain amount of not just dedication but excitement about your craft. And do you still get excited about your craft?
Absolutely. I don't think I could still do it because there are definitely easier things. I mean, I could do a 9 to 5,
right,
and come home and go to sleep at 11 o'clock as opposed to 3 o'clock. But it would not be as fulfilling. I tell people I'd rather make $10 selling my art than $50 selling hamburgers because
sure.
But that's just how I am. And I mean, I've pissed off a couple of folks because like sometimes people will say, do you consider yourself a black cartoonist? And I don't begrudge anyone for how they answer that. I do say I'm a black cartoonist because that's how the world perceives me. That's how my customer base perceives me, and that's the audience that has embraced me, and
right.
That's the one that I try to give a good product for. And it also, if anything, has made me more, really buckle down more because, I hate to see stuff when it's our stuff and it's like, there's like typos on the first page. And I'm like,
it's substandard, yes.
Yeah, and I don't want anyone to be like, hey, how was the book? Well, the brothers tried. They tried their best. I'm like, really? No, listen, like, I want us to put our stuff like, John Jennings and Damien Duffy did that Black Comics book, and that book can hold its own with any book.
Sure.
John Jennings, I was actually talking to him today. All he has to do is say, hey, Jerry, I got this project, and I'm like, okay, I'm in. Because I know that he's going to take care of business.
Right.
I know that if my name is attached to it, there's not going to be typos. There's not going to be, and I mean, typos happen. But if I tell you, and I'm like, hey, you spelled fantastic with a K. Did you do that on purpose? Yo, you want to talk about grammar? You want to buy my book? I'm like, well, I don't really want to give to your Kickstarter campaign if you're not going to reward me by making this your best product.
Right.
You
know. We've mentioned black guilt marketing on a couple shows where, blacks want you to purchase whatever they have. They want you to support whatever they do just because they're black and not necessarily because they're good. And it's a touchy subject for some people because they go, well, we want to support our people, but to what you said, if they can't spell, if they can't draw, if somebody's got, if realistic life drawing people only have 3 fingers on both of their hands because they can't fit the 4th one in or whatever, or somebody's got, like you said, typos on the first page. I had somebody want me to review their stories online, and they had typos in the first paragraph, and how do you support that? And people go, well, yeah, but you got to support our people. I think there still has to be an expectation of quality, which is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. We tried to do an anthology about 10 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And that just went horribly, horribly wrong because people were all over the place. Like on one hand, we had, Dwayne McDuffie, who was interested in writing the story. We had, people like David Walker, who is also one of my favorite people, and Howard Simpson, and just people like that. And then, the brother Kenji Marshall, who I think is also really top notch. And then there were people that just wanted to be in it and felt that we owed it to them because they
sent you something.
Yeah, because they came to Ekbach. And it's like, look, if this is the first time we're doing something like that, it's got to be, my dream was to have it with Blackjack and Brother Man and, Nightjack and Witch Doctor and Purge and, just top line stuff, Keith Knight stuff.
Right.
Because, we really can go toe-to-toe with anybody, and I never wanted to be like, like I said, oh, well, the brothers tried. Oh, it's good for a black product.
Yeah, it's that caveat. It's that sociological caveat as if, we always have to accept a lesser standard of quality because, well, brother did what he could.
Yeah.
It's hard, and that is a hard part of being a black creative because you do want to support people, but if people can't do the minimum, that would be necessary for self-support, it's kind of a tough uphill tug. And then who wants to pull that along? You don't want any of that taint rubbing off on you because you associated yourself with somebody merely because they wanted something rather than they did something, of quality.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you obviously don't have to worry about that problem now. Let's talk editorially. What kind of trials, tribulations, what kind of challenges do you have today most of all when you're trying to create?
The creative part comes fairly easily because I get ideas. I'm one of these people that I never sit down without an idea. Like even when I'm doing Mama's Boys, I never sit down without knowing what I'm doing. By the time I sit down, I'm whipping out my phone because I've taken a picture of some kid riding a skateboard with his pants sagging, and I go, okay, so when I go home, I'm going to do this, where as the kid skates down the street, his pants, come down, and then something happens, or blah, blah, blah. And then I have it already formatted in my head. And, my kids, I have two sons, 13 and 15, and they were so funny because when they were younger, they used to be, hey, Dad, what would be a funny Mama's Boys? Yusuf would come home and he'd do this, and he'd slip on a banana peel and he'd fall down. And I go, oh, yeah, that's cute. And that went on for a couple of years. And then one day, one of us said something like, yeah, that's cute. Wait a minute. That's pretty funny.
Right.
And then they also got past the part where I'd be like, hey, look at this. No, that's funny, Dad. And now my 15-year-old especially is like, Dad, I think you need to rewrite this last line because where he says blah, 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 no, he wouldn't be doing that. He would have said blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh. And, I take I take it to heart. And
Right.
you know, when you know, I'll go back for a second and then come forward. One of the things that I had started to do once I left Sports Illustrated for Kids was I started illustrating books for other people, children's books.
Okay. Sure.
And that was the first time that I had actually done those kind of things. I was like, wow, okay. So now what I do is I'd say maybe about 4 times a year I will do a book for somebody where, you know, I mean, I have to like it, first of all, and then I basically, you know, it's just the two of us. So I'll illustrate it. I have a friend of mine who's a great designer. I got an editor, and then I just show them how to publish their own children's books.
Sure.
And, you know, and then, you know, I helped George Frazier, who has a thing called FrazierNet. He's one of the big African-American networkers. I met him at Circle of Sisters in New York like 2 years ago. And he says, you know, I've been trying to do this children's book for about 3 years with my sister. You know, I'm going to send it to you. And people say that all the time.
Sure.
By the time I got home, he had emailed me the manuscript. And, you know, we worked it. And as big as he is, you know,
right.
He's always on Black Enterprise and the Tom Joyner Show. You know, he sent it to me. He said, well, what do you think? I said, well, it's okay, but it's probably not where it should be to have your name on it, because I know you want to have, you know, you have the way that you want to be represented. Here's some suggestions. And because this was my specialty, he was like, okay, you know, here are the car keys. You know, take it for a spin. And then, you know, I helped him to publish this book about when he was growing up in the foster care system with his brother and sister. So
right.
now he has this book about him being in foster care. And so he's going to different agencies, and, you know, he's got corporate sponsors buying the book and giving it out. So it just got to be one of the Amazon bestseller list, you know.
Right.
So it's really cool. So
yeah.
I never thought that I could write a long book, because one of the reasons why I think I went into advertising was, you know, nice short headlines, you know, a paragraph or two, and then you're done.
Right.
Because I remember back in school, you know, you have to write a 10-page paper, and I'd be like, oh, God, I'd be triple spacing and using the biggest font, and, you know. And I started writing this one, The Offenders, and when my kids would come home, I'd read it to them, and they'd say, hey, Dad, you know, you should add this, you should add this. And before I knew it, it was 228 pages. I was like,
wow,
I never thought I could write a 200-page book.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot, when I was younger, I never thought I would read a 200-page book. So that shows how far I've come.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the newest thing. That's what we are, you know, I just published literally like 3 weeks ago, and I'm about to do my big print. You know, I'm got my uncorrected proofs out, and I got some kids reading it in focus groups and stuff like that. But that's the exciting thing now, you know, and being able that I did it with my kids makes it even more special.
Yeah, how does that feel that your kids have actually grown into, you know, they have matured into your creative meme space?
It's awesome. I mean, first of all, it's funny because they are almost they're very similar to my Mama's Boys characters. So when you talk about life imitating art, you know, they're 2 years apart. They're both boys. The oldest is more shy. The youngest is more in your face. So that kind of stuff cracks me up. The fact that I'm able to do this with them is really cool. And my youngest son, so, you know, bullying is a big theme in a lot of schools, and I do a lot of school visits. So I wanted to do something about bullying. But I was like, well, the one thing that, I didn't want it to be about a boy that gets picked on, so we did it from the perspective of the kids who are bullies, but they don't really realize that they're bullies.
Okay.
So what happens is, I also want to make it exciting, so we made a superhero book. These middle schoolers get superpowers, but instead of, like, when they change into their super selves, instead of being cool like, Spider-Man and Nova and Iron Man, they actually take on the characteristics of the kids that they bully. So the one kid that bullies on the overweight kid gets really, really overweight, like grossly overweight.
Okay.
So one kid who picks on, his parents are dentists, so, he's always snapping on kids for braces or buck teeth. He gets these almost like saber-tooth tiger teeth, metal.
Yeah.
That
Sure.
kind of thing. The one that calls kids mousy and all that is about 6 inches tall. And now they have to try to save the school, but now they're embarrassed to go out because, they're fat and short and brainiac and all this stuff, so now they get teased. So, we did a couple of things, and like I said, we print up the first 100 just to kind of get it out there.
Right.
And, got a couple of teachers like, oh, my God, we want our school to do this in September for our school read, our school-wide read. It's like, okay, that's cool. And then the library's like, hey, we want to buy, 25 copies for summer reading. It's like, okay. And then we got a call, yeah, can your son Aaron do this interview on Huffington Post Live? It's like,
sure.
Okay, yeah, they want to talk about comics in the book and all that. It's like, okay. It's like, all right, who is he going to be by himself, or is he going to be talking to some? Oh, yeah, he's going to be talking to Drew Pearce, the guy who wrote Iron Man 3.
Iron Man 3, yeah.
I'm like, excuse me? Yeah, Drew Pearce, Iron Man. So my 13-year-old is going to be talking to Drew Pearce from Iron Man 3 and this, the guy from HuffPost Live. Yeah, I'm like, okay. And then while he's there, he's like, oh, yeah, my friend Jason Segal is here from the 5-Year Engagement. He goes, hey, Aaron, how you doing? I'm like, wow. So I'm like, okay, I think I got a new pitch, man. I'll definitely take the back seat. I'm like, all right, Aaron, go do your thing. So well, that was actually a really good interview, and I was very proud of him for how he was able to handle himself.
Yeah, how did it go? You listened to it live, or what did you do? Check it out later?
I listened to it live. I was actually there because they told me that they wanted me to be there, so I didn't know if they were going to talk and ask me anything.
Sure.
And they didn't, so I just kind of kept quiet and let Aaron do his thing.
That's very cool.
I actually do have a link to it, which I'll find and I'll put up in the chat room, because it's actually pretty cool to see him talking to these guys. So I'm like, all right, you can do your thing.
Let me remind you something. When you're going to have appearances or you have any kind of milestones coming up, any publication dates, anything like that, if you wouldn't mind remembering to go and log on to BSFS, BlackScienceFictionSociety.com, and put those events in the events calendar. Because one of the cool things is, when people are getting ready to go into a weekend, or maybe they've got, someone's going to be up in Detroit for the con in August, or they're going to be someplace in September, they can go and take a look at what may be happening in that city, what may be going on that they may have an affinity for. And obviously, the kinds of things that you do, if there's an opportunity for somebody to see you at OnyxCon or, wherever you might be, that would be great if people could just drop into one place and take a look at where black creatives may be showing up in America.
Oh, very cool. Absolutely.
So that would be great. And even your sons. I mean, look, all of a sudden, through your encouragement, because, if you didn't encourage them, they wouldn't be the kids that they are. Look at how they're branching out. I mean, I know it's not like making a $200 million movie for your son that, he could be in and you could be in, and whether you're, see, people get mad at me because I say he's not the strongest actor. But, I mean, to be able to kind of pass this to another generation through your kids, I think that's pretty cool and very remarkable. And that's great support for them, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a little different than my mom, thinking I'd be living in her basement.
Well, she had some legitimate fears. I mean, she probably knows you a lot better than we do. I don't know if I want you living in my basement, but I mean, she pulled that one out because she knew. But she also did that out of love, because nobody wants to see their child as a failure, and nobody wants to see their child unhappy and not doing something they don't want to do. Or wait, that was two double negatives. They don't want to see their child forced to do something they don't want to do. And now you've got your kids, obviously, like I said, they have absorbed a portion of your creative meme, and here they are branching out on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would never want my kids to do something that they not want to never do.
Wait, hang on, I got to do the math. All right, so let's talk a little bit. We got about a half an hour to go. Let's talk about where you think you might be. What do you think, like 5 years from now or 10 years from now? What have you got in the hopper that may be pushing you in other directions, or what kind of creative things do you have on your horizon that people are going to be looking forward, or you can at least make them look forward to seeing what comes out? Where do you think you're going to be 5 years from now?
Well, one of the funny things is, I had been going to ECBAC, which, if anyone doesn't know, East Coast Black Age of Comic Convention. So they always credit me for being one of the founding members. So we wanted to do something in New York, and I know you had Turtel on recently, and I went out to Chicago about 4 years ago, I would say.
Oh, man, you should have called me. I'd have taken you to lunch.
Yeah, see, hang out with them clubs that you can go to. And, we were talking about we should do like a nationwide Black Comic Book Day. So, he's like the mayor of Chicago, so he's like, yeah, let's do it. So it was kind of cool because, and this was 2 years ago, he did his in Chicago, I think at the DuSable Museum. I did mine at Human Bookstores in Harlem. And Reggie Hudlin coordinated his event in Los Angeles. I think Andre Batch did one in Detroit, and Joseph Wheeler from OnyxCon did one in Atlanta. So it was like the second weekend in February, and we had like 90 people at Human. Human was set up for like 20 people, so we got 90 people. They were ecstatic.
Sure.
So we did it twice there at Human. So unfortunately, they closed down their store, so we were looking for a new location. So I reached out to someone at the Schomburg in Harlem, and coincidentally, they had already spoken to John Jennings about an event, and then John Gales about another event. So they were like, hey, can you guys morph into one giant Voltron kind of convention, Right. And so that's what we did. And again, we're setting up, 200 people, because John Gales did a preview of his movie, and John Jennings was doing his Black Kirby exhibit, and I got the vendors going. And by the end of the day, the woman from the Schomburg called. She said, Jerry, we had 1,400 people come through the door.
Oh, man.
Like, we were floored. We were like, 1,400? Yeah, like everybody, people like N. Stephen Harris, just looked at me when they were leaving, just smiling. They had been there all day, just smiling, people hugging each other. It's like, wow, it was amazing. So I will definitely post when we put that together again, because we'll probably do it January or February again of 2014.
Okay.
But we had the sisters out there, Jennifer Coutey and Regine Sawyer, and Alex Simmons was there, and all different kind of people, Brother Urias. So some real quality stuff. Yumi Odom from ECBA came down. So that was one of the things that is definitely on the horizon, to do that.
Right, to build that up. Sure.
Yeah, as far as like other stuff, when I was talking about kind of putting my name out there, or branding my stuff, like I said, some people knew me from King Features, from Mama's Boys. Some knew me from, Chicken Soup.
Right.
I had done this Flash animated piece years ago, confronting the black superheroes of my childhood, where it's a character of me, and I'm interviewing Black Lightning, Black Goliath, Black Panther, Falcon, and I think one other. And and Sports Illustrated for Kids. Somebody wrote in the chat room, and I did that. This is kind of a goof, and that thing made it was just funny. I did not expect it. It went more viral than anything that I had ever done, and people it almost completely blew Mama's Boys out the water, because it was like, actually someone just posted up a link, and I just did it as a goof, and it just hit a chord with so many people about, as a kid growing up, and when you realize that, none of the black superheroes could really fly on their own or shoot eye beams or, all this cool stuff. So that was one of the things I had put in to kind of brand people, because I did a panel at Kids Comic Con, and I was there with Joe Illich, and someone mentioned I did that, and he's like, "Oh my God, you're the guy who did that? I love that." I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess I gotta fess up and tell people about that."
Sure.
Yeah. And then the last thing is looking at, I'm liking the novel thing, and I definitely have something I'm working on now about a 17-year-old superhero who lives in Harlem, and he and his father, okay, black boy with a father, are trying to come up with a way to clean up their Harlem neighborhood. But it's a little, there's action, but it's not just about beating guys down. It's about changing their mindset. And for this one, I actually hired Machindo to create the character. Like, I gave him sketches, and then he just worked his magic, and he sent it to me, and I was like, wow, that's exactly what I want. So that'll be, about a 300-page. I'm about halfway through it, but I had to stop to do some other stuff, but I definitely want to get back in there. So that will probably be the next thing I release once the Offenders is,
wait, is this going to be a graphic novel that you just spoke about? Because
no, they're both novels. So the Offenders is a middle grade novel, and this one will be a teen, like a teen novel.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
How are you finding? How are you managing to? And I know you said you're kind of putting it aside, but how are you managing to write at a targeted teen level when teens traditionally don't read novels? Obviously, the most accessible art form for teens is a comic book, a comic book or a movie or a cartoon, something like that. So how do you focus yourself? How do you, artistically kind of focus your efforts to being something that would be palatable and attractive and hold a teen's attention?
Well, I just put a link on your in the box so you can see a picture of Positive Force. And first is making him look like someone that the kids will actually want to read about. And whenever I show the poster, even these kids, these like non-readers are like, "Yo, when's that coming out?"
Right.
Now the other thing is me, with that you can't do it thing. It will probably be the death of me. But when I would approach mainstream publishers and they're like, yeah, off the record, black teenage boys don't read. I'm like,
right.
Okay,
right.
Are there no books for them because they don't read, or do they not read because there are no books for them?
Right.
And it's like I've got 2 black teenage boys who live with me, and they don't really want to read the Hunger Games. And
Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and Harry Potter, that's not what they do. But, this Positive Force guy, he's a 17-year-old superhero. He lives in Harlem. He's playing Call of Duty by day. He's a hero by night. He's got a hoodie on and his gear. And audiobook. Someone wrote that. Yep, I'll have to, put these pipes to work. Use my English leather training to.
Well, yeah, like I said, you would be great at illustrating that sort of thing, or excuse me,
articulating. There you go.
Yeah, whatever they call it, doing the voiceover work. Yeah.
So, I would definitely try it, and if it helps these teens that they can. Pop it in their MP3 player and listen to it as opposed to, reading it for now.
Keep it, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But, I'm just going to try different outlets for this because, the whole reading thing, I actually do some stuff. I do a lot of school visits and things like that. And one of the books, this woman called, and she's like, I got this kid. He's 17. He's probably reading on a 4th grade level, and ordered one of my books. I think it's Who Would Have Thunk It? And she said normally she reads it to him, and he identified with the characters so much that he asked if he could read it to her. And she wrote me this email. And I called her up, and we're like almost in tears because it's like this kid who hates to read is like reading my book out loud, and it's
That's
like
great.
Yeah, and when I go to these things, if I got to stay an extra hour to sign autographs, because I remember going to one of these Comic Cons that they used to have in New York, like in Penn Station. And, man, I met my favorite artist from Marvel, and I was probably about 10. And I went over and I was like, Mr. So-and-so, can I have your autograph? He's like, yeah, I'm trying to sell a book here, or you want to buy my book?
Right.
It wasn't even a comic book. It was like a $30 book, and this is like in 1980 when $30 was like $70.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what. Come back in, half hour. Maybe I'll give you an autograph.
Oh man, yeah. That's
as a 10-year-old. I was like, I am not coming back to this guy. I don't even care if he's going to give me the book free. I'm like, I don't need it that bad. So, I think of, I think it's like Joe DiMaggio or Lou Gehrig, one of the Yankees. They were like, well, why do you play so hard every day? He's like, well, I play this way because I never know if somewhere in the stands there's a kid watching me play for the first time. And, I think about that, and I'm like, okay, so I make sure that, like I said, I answer the emails, I do the autographs, I visit the schools, and when the school brings me in for the day, like I don't go to the teachers' lounge at lunch. I'm like sitting down, having lunch with them. I'll like shoot hoops with them at recess. I got a fan letter from a kid. He's like, yeah, and I knew after that you were one of us. So I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Well, even something as simple as that. I mean, the fact that they can relate to you on a personal level opens them up to the possibility of saying, well, wow, he's a pretty cool guy, and he writes books. Well, what does he write? Because sometimes it takes that personal touch. Sometimes it takes making that connection to break through to an effective level where kids are thinking something other than getting over whatever kids think.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually, I went to a community center, and like I said, I usually play ball with the kids, and the heavens were shining down on me because I was trying to show off. So I took a shot from like half court, and I swished it. Okay, I won't say that happens all the time, but this particular time, and this kid saw it, and he literally fell down, and he gets back and he goes, "Yo, but you're an artist though." I'm like, listen, you can do like, I will go home and I'll play Xbox tonight.
Right.
It's like you don't, when you're an adult or a grown up, which, I'm an adult, I'm not necessarily grown up, but you can still do these things and read comics and play video, and I'm watching The Simpsons, and and you can actually support a family and have jobs that you like, and all kinds of stuff. So that's kind of what I try to instill with them.
So in speaking of that kind of thing, what kind of community outreach do you do, deliberately, not the things where people call you, but do you have things that you do in terms of community outreach to try to reach out to kids, try to reach out to young adults, and also, more so to support them, and also, you sometimes you have to do community outreach in order to grow your own audience.
Absolutely. It's all about the audience.
Right.
I work here in Connecticut with a place called the Carver Foundation. And it's a community center, George Washington Carver Community Center, and they actually send me to about 5 different after-school programs.
Okay.
So, one day I'll be at one school, and Tuesdays I'll be at another school, and I'll do that for like 8 weeks at a time. And showing them about the books, and one day we'll draw Stewie, one day we'll draw, this one or someone from the Boondocks, and I'll show them how to do this and how to write. I've also done a couple of, third strike schools, schools where the kids have been kicked out of,
every other school. Sure.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, this is right before, getting scared straight, some schools that look like they should be the subject of one of those HBO specials, and here I am showing them how to do cartoons. But like the ones that really get it, like when you break through, like all of a sudden, they hit me up on Facebook. Hey, Mr. Kraft, here's a picture of the joke that I did. What do you think? And then, the teacher be like, do you know that all the kids in the class are afraid of that kid because he's in a gang? And I'm like, really? I was like, he was like a normal kid to me.
Sure.
He came up and asked me for an autograph.
Right.
So to see these kids be kids is just awesome. It's like, wow. So, you just never know the impact that you have on some of these kids. One girl I kind of took under my wing, at one of these Third Strike schools in Mount Vernon, and she liked Mama's Boys so much, and I ended up using a blurb from her. So I put her name on the back cover, you know, and sent it to her, and she flipped because now her name is in the book. You know?
Right.
So yeah, it was pretty cool.
You know, it's rare that somebody achieves your level of success and yet still is so accessible. And you know, that's, I mean, obviously talking to you, you're level-headed. You obviously like what you do. You enjoy your audience, and I don't think you take your audience for granted at all. Those are things that push through. And when you look at the kinds of connections that you've made with these kids, and you know, like the gang kid, you know, maybe he's a gang kid and tough, excuse me, and all of that for protection. You know, that's his protective coloring, his uniform, and yet, you know, somehow you got inside of that, or what you did got inside of that and brought out a whole different aspect to this person. And to the marketing portion of being a Black creative, you aren't doing anything really more than growing your audience and extending the reach of your creativity. And people should take note of that, because the kinds of things that you do out in the street have a lot to do with the level of success that you can attain. Because if you can't make connections with people, I don't think you're going to be successful, especially if you're a creative. What do you do when you don't have an audience? You're not really a creative, you're a wannabe.
Right.
And you know, you've done this. I know it seems like you did it for ages and ages, but look at you. You know, you started out in the 90s. Look where you are today, successful, family guy. Excuse me, my allergies are acting up. I'm allergic to airborne BS. So I always set off my own allergies. So all of these are pretty cool things. And for those of you who are listening either live or are going to pick this up as a podcast, take a look at Jerry Craft's website. It's www.jerrycraft.net, JERRYCRAFT, all one word, .net. And, you know, take a look at Mama's Boys. I have a question for you. When do you think your novel will maybe be done and out for people to take a look at you in another genre?
The Positive Force one, I'm going to try to get back in the trenches. It's about halfway through, and I did a lot of research because I want there to be some historical context in there as well.
Okay.
So I got to get back in there. So I hope to get my big order of The Offenders out in the next 2 weeks. And then I will put my head down and get back to that. So hopefully by the holidays, I'd like to have that out. You know, I think one of the big things is, and you got to watch, because when I first started with Mama's Boys, like I said, I had put in all these mainstream outlets and got no love whatsoever.
Right.
As I've gotten out there a little bit more, I've been embraced more by, you know, librarians and schools and stuff, and they would then buy it and give it to their kids. So that was the first time that I got, you know, white readers and girl readers and stuff like that.
A lot of different crossovers, demographic crossovers.
Right. And the weird thing is, like, if it's a school where the parents send the kids to school with money and they can buy whatever book that they want,
right,
I do very well. When it's the parents that are choosing it, and the kids are so many times the kids will be like, "Oh, Mommy, I want Mama's Boys." And like, "Oh, honey, let's see what else is here." Oh, and I've seen them like literally like a tug of war, like take the book out the kid's hand, like, yeah, Daddy will approve, you know. But So with the offenders, this is the first kind of, because it is a bullying theme, I really made them very diverse. There's
Sure.
a black kid. There's a Puerto Rican character who I'm really proud of because I researched the hell out of him. And I sent it to a bunch of my Puerto Rican friends at first, and they were like, dude, this would not happen in the Puerto Rican household. And I'm like, really? And they're like, let's have lunch.
Yeah.
And my friend Eric Velasquez, who's another brilliant children's book illustrator, and he's like, no, this is wrong, this is wrong. So I felt like I was back in Philly with Machindo in the street light.
Right.
But I wanted it to be accurate. And, the only thing that has been disappointing with this so far is, I went on a lot of the Black parent websites and I did all this stuff, and I'm like, hey, here's this new book and that. And with the offenders, it's been the white outlets that are like gobbling it up. And, the ones, a lot of the black sites, I'll get, hey, we need more books like this and congratulations, but there's not the support. And I'm saying, well, yeah, I can't make more books like this unless I actually sell this one. So
right.
I think a lot of times when you have an author of color, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners the same thing, we really need the support, and as a fellow author, that it's like, okay, especially you got 900 books in your garage, you don't want to be giving them out as Christmas presents for the rest of your life.
Or having them hold up somebody's bedpost or blocking the door open so the air comes through or anything like that. Yeah, you're right.
Or, they'll be like, hey, Jerry, you still, doing, and I've got my blue vest on. I'm, like, greeting at Walmart.
Well,
and I'm like, well, I couldn't make more because you didn't buy the old ones.
Right, and because of that, I keep two things on file. I actually practice two things just in case, this just doesn't work out for me. And one is, will that be paper or plastic?
Yep.
And the other one is, would you like fries with that?
Yeah.
Because, being a black creative is not easy. First of all, if you're a black creative and you only want to sell to the black market, that's an undersell. That's like trying to go after low-hanging fruit, and that doesn't necessarily always work. And if you don't have a broader mass appeal, sometimes you're just not going to make it. And I think that in some ways, if you can't write or create for a broader market, maybe you're selling yourself short. Because excuse me, what you're doing is you're going for, a certain market that may not want what you want, and if that's all you have to offer, you're kind of screwing yourself,
Right. But then, in the same token, and I know we got 2 minutes left. I don't want to open up another 2 hours of conversation. But when I put these diverse characters in the offenders,
right,
and in 2 weeks, we're on Huffington Post. We got San Diego Live saying, hey, we want to review this for our TV show. We want to do this. We want to do that. And then I'm like, okay, so I wasn't really getting the support from my folks with this, so maybe this is the way to go. Then, you start getting the expose, Jerry Kraft sold out because now, he used to do Mama's Boys. Now all the characters are white. I'm like, well,
yeah.
Jerry Kraft had to eat.
He's a sellout.
I would not.
Or what's up with that? Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's too important to me and to always be able to have my kids and our kids identify with it. So, I would not do that, but like I said, the offenders definitely is more of a diverse thing, and I did definitely go to our markets first,
sure.
And I get the hey, way to go, give you one of these and a pat on the back, and it's like, okay.
And then you sit there and wait.
Right, and they're like, okay, right, and then it's like, oh yeah, okay, well I'm gonna take my son to GameStop. Like, your son that you complain that he never reads,
right?
Yeah, so you're gonna spend $94 on the prestige edition of Call of Duty Black Ops but you wouldn't buy my $10 book to get him to read. Okay, well, good luck with that.
Yeah, have fun with it. I hope that works out for your kid. Look, Jerry, we've run out of time, and we don't have to hit it exactly on the mark, but I would like to do this. I would like to revisit with you, a few months down the road, once the book is out, once you've got a few more things going for you, and let's talk about where you are and what has gone on. But I've had a good time, and I hope you have too. And
absolutely.
if you and please do put on the events calendar anything that you are going to, where you're going to be appearing, when you have milestones coming up, a book release, anything like that. And also, you might want to consider at BSFS blogging, putting in links to anything that talks about your work so people can see how you're perceived outside of our community, because it's a much bigger world out there.
Okay, sounds good. I'm in.
And thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. You make my job much easier, and I see that our peerless leader is getting ready to take us out. What do you have to tell us, Jarvis?
Oh man, it was a wonderful, wonderful show. It was great getting to know Jerry on a more personal level, getting to know some of the details and how he got started and everything. And I just want to continue to thank everybody for participating. Thanks, 1,000 thanks for coming on the show, Jerry.
Oh, no problem. I want to give a shout out to my man Frank who's listening, but thank you. I had a great
All right, great. And as William stated, please come on the site and let us know of different things that you're working on, different things, different dates. You can put those in the event calendar. And just continue to listen to the other shows, participate on the site, drop some knowledge where you can, or comment on other things that people are doing. The site, I keep reiterating this, you kind of get out of it what you put in. And so just please get active, everyone on the site. And thank you again for participating on the show, and have a good night.
You got it.
And this is the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. As was said, please support the show. It's on every Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern, and of course you can follow the clock through the other time zones. And for those who do miss the show, we do have the podcast up very, very shortly after this. So if you do miss a show, please check it out yourself, and let your friends and family know about it too, because you never know where some affinity is going to come from and what you might listen to and what you might learn. So thank you, everybody. It's William Hayashi wishing everybody a good morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you're listening to this, and we'll see you next week. Thanks much. Bye-bye.
All right, good night. Bye-bye. 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 Good night. Bye-bye.